welcome back to the Sarai Show. All right, let's talk about something that a lot of people ignore until it starts messing with their lives. You ever look at your grocery bill and think, wait, why is everything getting more expensive? Or maybe gas prices shot up overnight and suddenly your paycheck isn't stretching as far. And then you hear that another war is starting on the other side of the world, and you think, well, that sucks, but that's their problem, not mine. Except, here's the thing, it is your problem. And not in some vague, oh, everything is connected kind of way. I mean, wars are big business. And guess who's paying for them? You, me, all of us. We are the investors in every conflict our country funds, except we don't get a choice in where our tax dollars go. And that's why politicians sell these wars to us like a product almost. It's why every conflict comes with a narrative, like the good versus evil storyline that makes it easy for us to nod along and say, yeah, this is necessary. Because if they told you straight up, hey, we're sending billions of tax dollars to fund a war that's going to make defense contractors very rich, you'd probably have some questions. But if they say instead, you know what, we're defending democracy, or this is about national security, most people don't think twice. That sounds important. And that's exactly the point. So today, I kind of want to break it down how war is a business, how we are the ones funding it, and why it affects you way more than you realize. So let's get into it. All right, let's talk about what's happening right now. So there's this big conversation happening between Russia and the US about potential peace talks. Sounds great, right? Countries talking, making deals, trying to stop the fighting. Who would be against it? Except there's a small little detail missing. Ukraine, the country actually in the war, isn't even in the room. That would be like if you were going through a divorce, but instead of you and your spouse sitting down to work things out, your spouse and their lawyer are negotiating everything without you even being there. And then they send you an email like, oh, yeah, by the way, we went ahead and made some decisions for you. Hope you're cool with it. Yeah, no, that's insane. But that's exactly what's happening here. Now, why does this happen? Because global politics isn't just about right or wrong. It's about who holds the most influence. And the hard truth, the countries with the most power and money tend to make the rules. That's why you always see the US, Russia, and China front and center in all of these conversations, while the smaller nations, aka the ones actually dealing with the war, often just have to deal with whatever is decided. And here's how this plays out almost every time. Step one, a conflict breaks out. Bigger countries take sides, not always because they care, but because of economic or strategic interests. Step two, sanctions, aid, and military support start rolling in, but behind the scenes, countries are calculating what they'll get in return. Step three, at some point, there's a push for peace talks, but not really letting the people involved make their own choices. The superpowers step in and handle it for them. And then step four, the smaller country gets left with whatever deal is made, good or bad. Most of the time, it's bad for them. And look, I get it. A lot of people assume that when these big governments meet up, they're discussing the best way to help. But these meetings are negotiations, not acts of kindness. They're figuring out who gets to keep what, who owes who, and how to spin it so it looks like a win for everyone involved. Now, here's what no one really tells you. Wars aren't just business for politicians and corporations. They're business for you, for me. Why? Because you're a stockholder in every war your country funds. And here's how that works. War is one of the most profitable industries in the world, but you're the one funding it through your taxes. That's why politicians go through such extreme lengths to sell the public on narratives they know will approve of, or at the very least not question. We have to fight for democracy. This is a battle of good versus evil. If we don't act now, it will come to our doorstep. Sound familiar? Look, I'm not saying some wars aren't justified, but you need to ask yourself, are we really making these decisions based on national security, or are we being convinced to fund wars because it keeps certain industries thriving? Weapons manufacturers make billions. Defense contractors rake in government contracts. Media outlets make money 24/7 covering war. Politicians secure their legacy and re-election campaigns. And you're the one footing the bill. Your tax dollars fund these wars, while the people making the real money aren't the ones risking their lives. That's why these conflicts are framed so emotionally. Because if they told you the war they're asking you to pay for is just another business move, you'd probably say no. I saw this pattern firsthand during my time in the military. On my very first deployment, I saw enough to notice the trend. A conflict breaks out, the media hypes up good guys versus bad guys. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, deals are being made. Months later, peace talks happen, but they rarely involve the people actually suffering. They involve the ones holding the power. One of the biggest wake-up calls for me was in Honduras in 2009. If you weren't paying attention back then, don't worry. You weren't supposed to. The world moved on and it was barely a blip in the media. But on the ground, it was a big deal. Governments played their parts. Foreign interests were involved. And by foreign interests, I mean mainly the United States. And in the end, the people who suffered the most had zero say in how it all unfolded. Now, you might be thinking, okay, cool story, but how does that actually affect me sitting here at home? Fair question. And here's how. These global decisions shape your economy. If the US pours billions into a conflict, that affects taxes, national debt, and even funding things like healthcare and education. Sanctions can lead to inflation, supply chain disruptions, and higher costs on things we use daily. Politicians use international conflicts to justify spending military action and even domestic laws. Think about how often wars and foreign policies are used as talking points during an election season. They influence what we see and believe. The media frames conflicts in ways that shape public opinion. Social media spreads misinformation that can manipulate how we think about these events. The trick with global politics is that it's like a slow burning candle. You don't always notice it's melting, but eventually the wax drips onto everything you own. Every election season, politicians love to bring up foreign policy. And why? Because international conflicts give them perfect talking points to justify things like higher military budgets, foreign aid spending, changes to immigration policies, even how they handle cybersecurity and national security at home. And you don't even have to agree with a politician's stance to recognize how much they use global conflicts as leverage. Think about it. A war breaks out. Suddenly, politicians start saying, oh, we need to increase military spending to keep America strong. A crisis in another country. Oh, we need to focus on immigration reform. A cyber attack happens. Oh, we need to expand government surveillance to keep us safe. It's all about how they frame the narrative, because fear, urgency, and national security always make a great campaign strategy. But how often do we actually ask, wait, how much of this is actually necessary versus just political theater? Okay, let's talk about your wallet. Because if war and politics don't grab your attention, I know money will. The moment a major conflict starts, you'll see instant shifts in the economy. Oil prices spike because supply chains get disrupted. Certain industries boom, like defense contractors, while others crash, like tourism or small businesses tied to global trade. Countries start printing more money to fund these wars, which can lead to inflation. And I know that inflation, it's one of those words we hear all the time. But let's just call it what it is. Your money doesn't stretch as far. That's pretty much it. And you feel it every time you buy groceries, fill up your gas tank, or check your electricity bill. Remember when gas was $5 and everyone was freaking out? That wasn't just bad luck. That was global conflict in action. And when it comes to jobs, what happens when companies feel economic uncertainty? They do what? Layoffs, budget cuts, hiring freezes. This isn't speculation. It's exactly what happened during the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022. Tech companies started mass layoffs. Small businesses struggled with rising costs. Meanwhile, military contractors were raking in record profits. So war doesn't actually just decide who controls a country. It decides who gets rich and who gets screwed. And unless you're a CEO in the defense industry, chances are you're in the second category. Now, something most people completely overlook: cybersecurity and the war for your mind. Because you see, this is the new battlefield. Sure, wars still involve tanks and missiles, but these days, conflicts are fought with disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks on banks, power grids, and hospitals, social media manipulation to turn public opinion. Think about how much chaos can be caused just by fake news spreading at the right time. If a headline convinces enough people to panic, stocks crash, companies lose billions, and entire governments can shift policies overnight. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just look at the rise of deep fake videos spreading false narratives. In 2022, during the early days of the Russia-Ukraine war, a deepfake video surfaced of President Zelensky, so the president of Ukraine, surrendering and telling Ukrainian soldiers to lay down their arms. The video was quickly debunked, but for those who saw it before fact checkers stepped in, it caused a lot of confusion and fear. Some Russia state media accounts even amplified it before it was taken down. And this matters because imagine if people didn't realize it was fake. Troops could have surrendered based on false information. Deepfakes are becoming a lot more convincing and could be used in elections, financial markets, or war strategies. Also, in May 2021, a ransomware attack forced the shutdown of the Colonial Pipeline, which supplies 45% of the East Coast fuel. Panic buying ensued. Gas stations ran dry, and fuel prices spiked. The hackers, who were a Russian-linked group called DarkSide, demanded ransom in Bitcoin, and Colonial paid $4.4 million to regain control, though some of the ransom was later recovered by the US government. But that just proves that a single cyber attack caused gas shortages, economic disruption, and public panic. If hospitals, water supplies, or power grids are hit, the consequences could be far worse. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that in the near future when it comes to wars. Governments and companies are racing to strengthen cybersecurity, but attacks are only getting more frequent. Also, social media platforms boost certain narratives while they bury others. In 2016, in Myanmar, Facebook amplified hate speech that fueled violence against the Rohingya Muslim. AI prioritized engagement, meaning sensational and hate-filled posts were more visible. The result, well, widespread misinformation that led to real-world violence and displacement. Facebook later admitted its algorithm helped spread hate, but they acted too late. And we see that in our own country. Social media companies don't always prioritize truth, they prioritize engagement. The more people interact with a post, the more it spreads, even if it's false. Political or war-related information can manipulate public opinion on a massive scale. So, your personal safety isn't just about avoiding physical danger. It's about protecting yourself from being manipulated by the war of information happening every single day. And listen, I don't say all this to make you feel powerless. The opposite, actually. Because the more you see the patterns, the less you fall for the distractions, the less you accept the first version of a story, the less you let these power plays control how you think. What if instead of shrugging and just saying, oh well, that's just how the world works, more of us actually paid attention? What if more people question why these patterns keep repeating? Who is benefiting from this? And more importantly, how do we break the cycle? Because the biggest advantages superpowers, corporations, governments have is that most people aren't paying attention. But now you are. So I want to hear from you though. Have you ever had a moment where you realized that the official story wasn't the whole story? The moment where something clicked and you thought, wait, this doesn't really add up. It doesn't have to be political, it can be anything. Drop a comment. I'd love to hear your experiences because the more we talk about this, the harder it is for history to keep repeating itself. Thank you so much for being with me tonight, and I'll see you in the next one.